Welcome back. In this video I'm going to show you the easiest way I have found to install the RC4WD drive stamp steel wheels onto a rig. And the rigs I'm talking about specifically today are the HBX Devestator and the Enduro24. They have a bit larger axle shaft than an SCX24 does, and the RC4WD drive tires come with a tool that looks like this. It's awesome, and what it's designed to do is be able to fit through this shaft and tighten up an SCX24 bolt, or the nut onto the axle. The problem is Enduro24s and HBX Devastators have a much larger nut than the SCX24, and it physically cannot get on it. And the reason is it's just too wide, and it will stop on the dome of this nylon lock nut. So you have to use a 5mm socket in order to get on that. The problem is a 5mm socket won't fit in there, and the 4mm tool that you get with the RC4WD drive wheels don't fit onto a 5mm nut. So there's a big problem here. How do you get this tightened properly when there's no real way to get a nut on it with this wheel assembled? And what I've found out, the best thing to do is put the hub straight onto the car without having the wheel mounted. And I've got a brass weight here. It could look like this hex, it doesn't matter. It basically is the brass version of this for a little weight up front. But anyway, when I start, what I do is look at these wheels, and dropping my tools here. I look for the hole that's right at the bottom of one of these points, because if you look on any of the others, it's not quite centered. See how they're not centered at the bottom of the point? But first time I put these together, I screwed it up. That's why I'm mentioning it. But I line up this hole that's right at the point of this hole with the backside and their corresponding alignments, so that these don't go together looking staggered. And what I'll do from there is get everything lined up. This one's already been installed. I just pulled it off for the demonstration today. But you no longer have to worry about the paper clip trick that everybody talks about. I don't know, I never had any luck with that. I used to try to force them down, but I'll show you the easy way. But the next thing I want to talk about here is the actual hub for the wheel. And it doesn't matter which direction you put the wheel on. I think the only reason to buy these RC4WD drive wheels, well, there's two. They're cheap, and they're heavy for what they are. They're not super heavy, but they're good weight. And you can mount them backwards, so the dish gives it a wider offset. I found out I don't really like that because it takes away diff clearance over terrain features. But you can mount it either with the dish on the outside or the dish on the inside. Your choice. I prefer dish on the outside, like they're intended to be from the factory, but we do things all the time that aren't intended. Anyway, what I do here is, normally when you go to put a wheel nut on the wheel, you would put it on like this, so that the threads go onto the axle first, and then the crown portion, this top portion here that you see that's tapered, normally goes out. Well, the problem is when you start putting this nut into that recessed area right there, and it's got a little ridge on it, and the nut will sink into there, and you won't be able to grab it anymore with the any tool, because you're now trying to turn the nut on a part that's rounded, and it just won't take it. It's too deep in and it just won't screw down. So what I do is I mount these with the tapered part towards the vehicle. So it's a backwards application of this nut. See how the tapered part is in? And what that does is it keeps the outer portion free so that I can get my 5mm nut on it. Or yeah, 5mm nut driver. And these need to be able to be free moving, and if I move the other side, it's not locked up. If it won't move easily, it's on too tight. Normally I like to make a wheel bounce. I'll zoom out a little bit, hopefully you can get it. If it can't bounce a little bit after you let go of it, it's on too tight, and that will overheat a motor. So I think I've got it pretty decent here. Doesn't appear to be bound. I might, just for the sake of the video, just take a little bit more out of it, and I'll see if there's any play in there. I think it probably feels okay. I'll tap that. All right, so once you've got the hub mounted, it's much easier now to start doing the wheel on. And what I do is I just set it on there and get everything lined up. I might even, if these weren't pre-assembled and already kind of sticking together, I would put a screw. It's a 1.5mm driver, by the way, for these little wheel screws, and I would put it through that one section I was talking about that has the point of the gap that points straight at the rim. And when I put these on, I'm gonna get the threads to just barely hold in. I don't want to tighten it down at all. And once it is just barely hanging on, it's not compressing the wheel at all, but that's okay. And then I'll just barely tack in the other ones. And the reason you barely tack it in is if you clamp it down, it's going to open up the other side of the rim, kind of like a clamshell. And what you do is get all these just barely tacked in. And this is by far the easiest way to do this that I found. And before I start really tightening them down, I will spin the tire on the rim while the bead locks are still loose, just to make sure that it's all seated properly, and it's going to go on and not have a portion of the tire not within the bead lock. All right, this is a pretty critical point during the build, and what I'm going to do is kind of go around and just do opposite corners. Just kind of get those threads tightened so that I'm going to turn this a little bit so I can get a better angle at it. Just taking up the extra slack with these screws. And I do it in kind of a triangle. That's what I like doing it. This triangle pattern with 1, 2, 3. So I've done this one, this one, this one, and then I'll jump straight across and do these 3 as a triangle. And I will progressively tighten them down so that the wheel is bolted on straight. And it's a progressive thing. If you get too tight on one side, the wheel's going to have some wobble. And by doing it in a triangle shape, I keep hitting my camera, sorry about that. By doing it in the camera in the triangle shape, you're putting an even tension on these bolts, and then you jump across and do the opposite triangle, and you'll find each time that it's a little bit looser than the ones you just did because they progressively get tighter excuse me, as you do it. And eventually they will be seated. Alright, that is the way I do RC four-wheel drive stamped steel wheels. It works really well, and I don't have any of the fits trying to squeeze them and compress them, but the whole key is line your rims up first, get them just barely tacked in, all 6 of these, and then well, let me start over with that. Put the hub on first, put the nut on inverted so that you have the purchase for the nut driver to be able to secure it. Then you do one of these at a time, just barely so they hang into the threads. You're not tightening them down yet. You do all 6. Make sure your wheel is on the rim completely seated, and then you progressively, in a star pattern, go ahead and tighten them down. And that's how I do it. I get really good results. My wheels don't wobble, and that's about all there is to it. Hope you enjoyed the video.